Hello, and welcome in my petals. Thank you so much for being here, and this will be part 1 of our ASMR book reading. We're going to start with one of my favorite books. It's been a long time since I've read this. So let's just jump right in. This video will be broken up. I might read a few chapters and then save some more for the next video. So we will be reading Phantom Academy by Shandy Bean. Prologue. Logan King did not believe in the college ghost. He believed in seeing Mia Pattern's boobs. The girl had been promising him a feel-up of them all term, and tonight she was finally going to deliver. He stepped slowly through the deathly silent Grand Theater, his mobile phone's torch his only asset in the all-encompassing dark. They had arranged to meet here at 11 p.m. Mia had been reluctant at first, as immediate expulsion would be served to anyone caught breaking the Academy's ridiculously early curfew, and because of the supernatural forces that supposedly roamed the empty corridors after dark. He'd been a little hesitant himself on account of the former, but the temptation of some behind-the-stage fun in a college that didn't allow students outside of their assigned dorms after 10 p.m. was too juicy to pass up. Mia Patton was fit, full stop. He stepped forward across the soft carpet towards the hardwood performance stage. The sight of the enormous velvet curtain made him feel small. "Mia," he whispered sharply in the great vacant space. It offered nothing back save the sound of his own voice. A tingle formed at the base of his neck. He flipped his phone over, and the screen light distorting his vision. "Are you coming?" he texted her. A rustle came from behind the curtain. "Mia," he called out, quickly making his way to the front of the stage and climbing its wooden steps. "Are you here?" A girl's laugh came in response. Logan smiled. His body pulsed with blood. He sharply pulled the huge stage curtain aside and stepped into the black. "There you are," he exhaled in relief at the shadowy figure moving behind the stage. His phone suddenly flashed a text. "Please don't be annoyed. I just can't risk meeting tonight, frowny face. See you in class tomorrow, XX Mia." He froze. His gaze desperately clung to his phone screen, not wanting to look at the figure that he sensed was now 2 inches in front of him. Hoping against hope. It was just Mia pulling a prank. He finally looked up. What he viewed was all the horror and disgust he'd ever witnessed and imagined, blended into one excruciating image. His insides twisted painfully, begging to scream, to vomit. He dived through the curtain and thundered down the steps, tripping before reaching the floor. He pulled himself up and felt something rough hit his face. He ignored it and ran blindly between rows of velvet chairs. His face was hit again and again. He steadied his phone light to find the calls and froze. The theater he'd just walked through was now filled with hundreds of nooses. Before he could rationalize the sight or determine a safe path between them, something threw one over his neck from behind. No, he screamed as he was hoisted roughly into the air. "This is my theater," were the last 4 words Logan King ever heard. Chapter 1. The Academy Ghost. Christine Daae woke up rather ungracefully and stared into the blank laptop screen she'd spent her last waking hours working on. Damn it, what time is it? She cried, jumping off her bed. She caught the computer before it joined her on the carpet. Where's my phone? She pulled back her white cotton sheets and found the device with its exhausted battery underneath them. No, dead phones did not provide alarm clock services. She dropped it back on the bed, then quickly pulled her messy hair into an equally messy bun, threw on a random combination of clothes, and ran out of her single occupancy dorm room. Please don't let me be late. Please don't let me be late. The absence of other rushing students mocked her. It was exam day, and she'd overslept. Not to worry, she thought sarcastically. It wasn't like students sold their arms off to attend the academy or anything. She'd only been enrolled 4 weeks. This was her first year, and she needed to get it together. She ran down the creaking stairs and through the long main corridor. London's Academy of Music was certainly not lacking in creepiness, with its giant portraits of oil-painted Mozarts and Beethovens occupying every space on the walls. Their eyes held an eerie realness, the kind Christine couldn't help but stare into no matter how many times she'd previously done so. It was easy to forget she was living in 2022 here. Christine secretly quite enjoyed the historical ambiance. The stone walls had borne witness to generations dating back to the 1800s. The dark hardwood, lino, managing to not look out of place despite its surroundings' age gap. The musty smell of well-used books. The only thing that remotely looked like it didn't belong was the abundance of printed white sheets dotted around the campus with half-hearted blue tack. Their messages were all the same. All students are reminded that curfew is between 10 p.m. and dawn, without exception. Anyone caught breaking this rule faces immediate expulsion. Students are also reminded that the Grand Theatre Room is strictly off limits without an invitation. Without bothering to look through the classroom window, she barged through the door. 20 students sitting with pens poised looked up at her. Ah, Miss Daae, Professor Persian mocked. As inspiringly punctual as ever. Any later, and you wouldn't have been eligible to take the exam. Sorry, Prof. I wonder, the sparsely haired man continued, if it is your intention to show us the same courtesy during performance this afternoon. Should we work around your schedule? Shall we add a disclaimer to our audience tickets? Performance time is subject to change depending on Christine Daae. She heard Carlotta Bell's unmistakable snicker across the room. No, sir. He directed her to sit, and she complied quickly, moving past desks to get to her regular seat next to her best friend Meg, all whilst trying to avoid eye contact with the rest of her classmates. Where were you? Meg asked. You actually nearly missed it. Christine looked at the clock, 9 a.m. That was close. She couldn't afford to keep doing this. Be quiet, the tall, stocky teacher hammered on his desk before sitting. You have 1 hour, 45 minutes. Begin. That was bloody hard, Meg said over the steam of her tea. It wasn't actually that bad, Christine replied before sipping as much of her coffee as the heat allowed. Damn, that's good caffeine. She leant back in the fabric canteen chair and let out a happy sigh. She'd made it. Theory exam done, just a practical to go. Says you, brainbox, their newest friend Lucy chipped in. I feel like you're one of those walking Wikipedia pages. Ask you when Beethoven published his first symphony, and you'll say, it's called Osborne flashcards, Christine said, and swapping humane amounts of sleep to stare at them. I might be able to store a couple of facts in my head, but I still can't master the correct position of holding the damn violin to my damn chin. You just need to relax. You're so uptight when playing, Meg said, peeling a banana. I know, Christine exhaled. I just want to get it right. She held her late father's violin case closer under the canteen table. Don't we all? Philip sighed. The four friends turned as the canteen doors opened loudly. The short but impossibly striking Carlotta Bell entered, accompanied by Joseph Bouquet and a few others from their performance class. God, bitch or not, there's just something that makes you look at her, know what I mean? Said Meg before turning away from the girl in the question. And back to her tea. Yes, Christine said, unable to stop staring. Carlotta produced an almost slow-motion trance-like effect with her flawless dark skin, loose black curls, and naturally pouted lips. She had been given the lead singing role in their exam production day. It was hardly surprising, as she had been rumored to already have featured in minor roles in London West End shows. Christine wondered what it must be like. So glad it's the weekend tomorrow, Meg groaned happily. Me too, Christine said before nibbling a piece of granola bar. No more Mr. Persian, Carlotta, or violin chafe. No more peeing my pants at Ghost every time I go down a dark corridor, Lucy said. A ghost that no one has actually seen, Christine reminded her. I'm sure that's what Logan King thought, Philip teased. The boy who committed last year? Christine asked. No one believes that, Meg said. The ghost killed him for invading his space. Poltergeists are very territorial. Christine smiled at her friend. Been here for 4 weeks. Been in the Grand Theater plenty of times for assemblies. And no floating white sheet in sight. It's true. For real, Meg replied. Mum's seen him. She's worked here longer than anyone and knows he exists. Says he's the ghost of a demented serial killer. That's genuinely why she won't let me move into a dorm room here. Yeah, that's why, Philip said with a snort. Not because your mom's super uptight or anything. Shut up, Meg tutted, nudging him. Kidding, he said. I'm in this paranormal lovers group on Facebook. We're trying to arrange a seance next week for Halloween to try and see this poltergeist up close. If you were a ghost, why would you haunt a music college? I could think of prettier places, Christine asked. Spirits don't have a choice, Meg said. They go where they have unfinished business, tormented to a soulless eternity unless they can make peace with what they're supposed to do. Christine flinched, then sipped her still hot white coffee. Before her dad had died, she'd found the supernatural fascinating, but now it was too real to find entertaining. Death and loss were a horrific darkness that had to be carried day after day into forever, with no soothing, no way to take it off ghost were something of a hope. A desperate plea to whatever was above that the soul lived on, and that she could see him again. She'd give anything for one more moment. Anything. Shit, Meg said, seeming to note her friend's expression. Sorry, I didn't think. Christine smiled and shook her head dismissively, but was unable to speak. Please, can we stop talking about ghosts? Lucy said, her shoulders shuddering. It's all fun and games until you need to use the college toilets and there's no one else in there, and you're too freaked out to open the cubicle door after you're done, because you just know there's a cute little smiling doll holding a knife waiting for you on the other side. I highly doubt the college ghost has any interest in watching you pee, Meg said, and they all laughed. Don't get too comfortable in those chairs, guys, came the unmistakable shrill of Carlotta. Christine turned to see the girl and her entourage staring at them as they walked to the exit. I'd hate for you to miss the performance exam. Your scores keep the rest of us in the higher percentile. Carlotta's friends laughed impossibly hard as they left the cafeteria, none more so than Joseph. I don't know how Joseph and Carlotta's fangirls can stand to simp over her all day. West End star or not, Lucy snorted. She's such a cow. Pretty sure they all deserve each other, Meg replied. Still, as much as I can't stand the girl, I do wonder how it must feel to sing on a major London stage. I thought you wanted to be in the orchestra, Christine said. I do, but I also kind of want to take the center bow at the end. They all laughed, then swigged the last of their drinks and rammed in the rest of their snacks. Carlotta had a point. Missing the performance exam or even being late for it would most definitely carry heavy consequences. I need to grab my cello from lockers, Meg said. Meet you in the theater? She got up and glided out of the cafeteria. Meg was so organized with it. Christine had none of her grace. She was having a good day if she wasn't late, holding an incorrectly tuned instrument, or surviving solely on the nutrition of cereal bars. It didn't help that in addition to being a full-time student, she also worked late shifts at a vegan restaurant that was a 20-minute bus ride away. There wasn't much choice. Her father had left all his life insurance money to pay for her next 3 years of tuition at the academy. It was the most beautiful gift from the most beautiful man, but it still left Christine running around like an over-caffeinated squirrel trying to keep up with dorm and instrument costs. It would all be worth it, though. She would be a renowned violinist just like he'd been. I'm gonna make tracks as well, Philip said. Make sure I'm all tuned properly. Me too, Lucy said, mouthful of donut. They said their goodbyes and cleared out with the rest of the crowd. Christine was happy to have that moment alone. She needed a second to decompress. Half of her still felt bad, like she was in bed, and this performance required her to be on point. Please help me to not mess up, she whispered to her father and busied her hands with taking the paper cups and wrappers over to the bin. Waitress mentality, she laughed to herself. The door opened behind her and crashed shut again. She let out a slight gasp and spun to see who entered so abruptly. A small but indisputable chill ran through her as she realized she was the only soul in the food court. She shook her head dismissively, discarded the trash, picked up her things, and headed out. Believe in ghosts or not, and though she'd never admitted out loud, since arriving at London's Academy of Music, Christine had never been able to shake off the feeling of being watched. Christine sneaked a peek through the red velvet curtain and quickly wished she hadn't. This was her first performance in front of a real audience. She took a step back and gave herself a once-over in the wall mirror, double-checking for ladders in her tights and smoothing out the front of her dress. She was entirely in black, as dictated for the orchestra. The idea was to be uniformly blended as one musical piece. Christine held no objections. The less visible she could make herself out there, the better. "Right, young musicians, everyone's arrived," Mr. Persian announced, coming in through the stage door. "A minor audience, considering who the Academy usually caters to, but you're just first years, and tickets were sold this afternoon purely to instill some nerve in you. If you can't muster your guts today, you have no business pursuing a performance career." Christine's stomach dropped. "Remember, your professors and examiners will be sat in the front row watching you diligently, particularly during solos. Time to see what you've learned over these last few weeks. 5 more minutes." London's Academy shows were always popular. Even rehearsals regularly sold out. They'd found fame putting on unique and original productions. The music in particular was what kept people coming back. Christine thought of her well-aged, shaky headmaster and marveled at his ability to create such a following. "Christine," Carlotta said, snapping her from her thoughts, "would you mind keeping your piece quiet while I do my solo? I'm not trying to be a bitch, hon, but your style really puts me off. Know what I mean? Talent doesn't always run in families, just saying." "I'll break a frickin' leg, Carlotta," Meg said, appearing beside them. Carlotta walked away with a smirk. "Come on, ignore her." Meg moved them both into the orchestra line, which was made up of 12 indistinguishably dressed students. Carlotta joined the handful of vocalists behind them. "Thanks," Christine whispered to Meg. "I'm a bag of nerves." "You've got this. This is nothing. Just a 45-minute recital that we've rehearsed hundreds of times. The audience isn't going to know if you mess up. Hell, most of them look like they don't even know what's going on. Full stop." You're right, Christine breathed. The student chatter around her seemed to grow louder. The walls moved closer. The lights glared brighter. "Just 45 minutes. "Megumi," Professor Giri, who had been giving the vocal majors a pep talk, ran frantically over to Meg, took the cello from her hands, and seriously examined her. "Have you double-checked it's tuned?" "Yes, of course, Mum," Meg whispered back. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mr. Persian announced from out front, "may I present to you our first-year performance class and their recital of Ange de la Mort, an Academy original." The curtain opened to a sea of 1,200 silent, stony faces. Christine and the rest of the line moved forward. The clop of their shoes echoed loudly across the stage. She wished the audience would chat among themselves. The quiet was disorienting and thick. She'd never felt anything like it. As part of their exam, they would perform together as a group, then each would perform a short solo of their main subject of study. The thought of all eyes on her while she played the violin caused her legs to wobble. The line split in two, and each half took their places on either end of the stage as practiced. They sat in unison on collapsible black chairs. Show presentation was everything, or so they'd been told. Christine suddenly became aware that this was the same stage that had once served as a suicide spot. Carlotta Bell came out center stage wearing a purple fitted dress. She smiled and raised her hands to the heavens as if receiving angelic applause. That was the orchestra's cue. Christine poised her bow. 1, 2. A melody of violins, flutes, and trombones commenced. Carlotta sucked in and began to sing, her voice powerful and fluent. It bounced off all 4 of the theater's golden walls. Christine squinted, trying to focus on her sheet music, which had started to blare in front of her. Her bow slipped in her swanny palm and produced an unappealing sound. A couple of her peers gave her daggers. She kept going, but slipped again, this time causing a louder, less forgiving sound. Carlotta turned to glare at her, while still belting out her song. Damn it, come on, focus, Christine. She stopped playing, gratefully resting, while each of her classmates recited their assigned solo. Though dreading her turn, she felt every beat of her heart as the girl who preceded her played. Silence, then her turn. She began, her bow slipping in her sweaty hand and causing the strings to shriek. She carried on. 1 scrap is fine. Keep going, she tried to tell herself. Her bow slipped a second time, then a third. All of her orchestra peers were now looking at her. The now silenced Carlotta gave a subtle snort. Die, get it together, Mr. Persian whispered sharply from the row behind her. The pressure she put on her instrument caused a string to snap. Damn it, she said, though nobody noticed. A thunderous clank came from above the stage, and all 1,200 audience members gasped in horror as they watched the light bar come loose and smash down onto Carlotta. My leg! Carlotta screamed at the crowd of students and staff around her. She had been quickly brought back behind the curtain. An ambulance had been called, and the ticket holders were reassured that the show would quickly commence. How did this happen? Professor Persian demanded. Who the hell is in charge of the stage? Joseph. It wasn't me, sir. Something just snapped. I wasn't even there. I was on props. I saw something, though. Something black. It was the ghost, I know it was. Shut up, stupid boy. Don't blame your shortcomings on phantoms. Compose yourselves, students, Miss Sherry said calmly, entering the backstage area. The show will go on. Christine Dye, get dressed in Carlotta's costume. All fell silent and looked at Christine. Even Carlotta stopped screaming for a second. Me? Why? Christine asked what everyone must have been thinking. Christine Dye has no business singing, Persian said, storming away from Carlotta, and towards his fellow colleague. What are you playing at, Miss Sherry? She knows the words. The vocals professor shrugged. They all know the bloody song, Sherry. Pick a singer. They all have their own parts to play. Besides, Christine is a lovely fit for the dress, she said, taking Christine by the arms and beaming. Where is Carlotta's understudy? Persian asked. Off poorly, very unfortunate, Jerry said nonchalantly. I really don't think I can, Christine started. Nonsense, Miss Sherry took her violin from her. If you can't adapt, then you have no business being in performance. Come now, let's get you dressed. Meg and the others looked equally as confused as Jerry led Christine to the dressing room and put her into the lead spare costume. Christine was stunned into silence. Within seconds, she was in the new outfit and being dragged towards the curtain. Miss Sherry went out first and announced the show's commencement. The curtain opened, and the orchestra did their familiar line routine. This can't be happening. Introducing Christine Dye, stepping in as lead vocalist. She walked onto the stage in slow motion. She saw the front row of examiners and their serious faces. Anthony Dye's daughter, one of them whispered. just let the music start. The orchestra began to play. Christine counted 5 beats before opening her mouth to sing. Persian was right. She did know the song, just not how to sing it. Why had Miss Sherry insisted she do this? She began singing in the poorest imitation of Carlotta imaginable. Every second felt like 2. All those faces on her. Her gaze caught one of them, a sandy blonde-haired boy with bright eyes. A sense of familiarity rushed through her. Memories of watching horror films after dark, scaring each other silly in the woods, losing her scarf in the icy pond, his cracking footsteps trying to receive it. Raoul de Chagny, it can't be. She grew dizzy and turned away from the audience. She raised her gaze higher and higher until it reached the observation boxes. There stood a soul with a black cloak, and a face of neither man nor woman but a thing, a monster, with eyes of fire, Death's head. She was staring directly at the Grim Reaper, and he at her. Everything went black. Chapter 2, Angels. Christine, wake up. She opened her eyes gently at the far-off whisper of her name. She lay on the sofa of a dressing room, alone. She looked around the mirror-filled space, feeling strangely on edge, feeling watched. The door opened. "Chris!" Meg exclaimed, entering and charging towards her for a hug. Her tiny body slammed into Christine's. "What happened? Since when do you faint?" "I don't," Christine groaned. "I mean, I haven't before. I thought I saw someone I used to know and got a bit woozy, I guess. And then—" "What?" Meg asked, pulling away from her almond-shaped eyes shining inquisitively. "Then I think I must have hallucinated. I saw something crazy. Well, next time, save the drugs for the after-party. Very funny," she smiled, pulling herself up. "What happened with the performance? Hold on," Meg said. "I've got to tell you, there's someone incredibly fit waiting outside for you." Christine furrowed her brow. After a 3-tap knock on the door, it opened and revealed the individual in question. Christine's eyes widened in shock. Raoul de Chagny, it really was him. He was older and taller, and his hair had slightly darkened, but she'd know that face anywhere. Those bright blue eyes, that celebrity smile. "Hey," he said with a slightly nervous laugh, still halfway in the doorframe. He wore a clean white top, light denim jeans, and a brown corduroy jacket. "Hey," she said, laughing too, out of delight, or the bizarreness of seeing him after all these years she didn't know. "Okay if I come in?" he asked. "I don't want to intrude." No, it's fine," Meg said, winking at Christine before heading to the door. "In fact, I need to get out of these orchestra clothes. Catch up with you later, Chris. Bye." Meg moved past the boy before mouthing "wow" at Christine behind his back. Christine grinned and rolled her eyes. "Wow, what's it been? 5, 6 years? I wasn't sure you'd recognize me," he said, striding in. "How could I forget?" she laughed, and wobbly got to her feet to meet him before stumbling. He quickly caught her by the elbow. "Careful," he said with a laugh, steadying her. "That was quite the faint you had out there." She took in his closeness and the unspoken memories between them. He pulled her into a tight hug. He smelled like laundry powder, cool body spray, and home. The memory of a home, so impossibly treasured and so totally perished. Raoul de Chagny. Her best friend from childhood, the boy from the neighborhood whose family would come round for garden barbecues. the grinning, cheeky blonde kid who tipped tadpoles into her lemonade. She chased him that day, trying to beat him with her plastic tennis racket. When she'd caught him, he'd fallen on his back, put his hands in the air, and with a beaming smile cried, "Okay, okay, you got me, I'm sorry." That smile had melted her anger, but she'd thrown the racket at him all the same and marched back to the garden bench. She swore she'd fallen in love with his face that day. Over the next few years, they'd played together at neighborhood events before forming their own independent friendship, bonding over a love of all things scary. He would come to her house after school, where they tried to outlast each other playing the hit horror game 3 Nights at Frankie's. On winter evenings, they'd go out into the woods searching for evidence of the legendary Pale Man. They both ended up at the same secondary school. He'd been her first kiss and her first real boyfriend. Ral had felt like 5 years of summertime. Then when they turned 13, it had all changed. Ral's father had taken over a business in France, and his whole family had moved there. They'd written letters to each other for a while, but as Christine's father's illness crept in, she couldn't find enough left of her to write. Summer was over. "I can't believe it's you," he said. She could feel his breath in her hair. "Me neither." She released him after not nearly long enough. "I thought you were in France." "I was, until Dad moved the business back to London. We just recently got here. He's one of the Academy's biggest investors and wanted me to experience some college life before I start training to take over the business. I'm on the music technology course. Any tips you could give me would be great." "You're talking to the wrong girl. I'm in performance. Strings specifically, though I wouldn't cue for my advice in that neither." "Strings? You mean like violin, like your dad?" "I never knew you were into music. I always thought you'd be a filmmaker, or one of those paranormal researchers, you know." "I guess things change." She smiled. He was so easy to smile with him. "So are you staying in one of the dorms here?" Before Christine could answer, a loud thud startled them both. They looked towards the source. A wooden clock had fallen off the back wall and broken onto the floor. "Gosh," Ral exclaimed, looking at the carnage. He went over and ran his hand along the purple textured wallpaper. "I guess the rumors are true. London Academy really is haunted." "Yeah, or really old," she teased, joining him and gave the surprisingly hollow wall a knock. "Miss Dye, are you in here?" Mr. Persian called into the dressing room in his thunderous voice, before seeing her and answering his own question. "The headmaster would like to see you as a matter of urgency." "Me? Why?" "Make sure your suitcase is packed," he said. Christine sat in the headmaster's office after saying a quick goodbye to her little dorm room for the next 2 days. It was raining heavily outside. She had one hand placed on her suitcase handle, ready to try for the 6 p.m. train. She could just hear her Aunt Val's voice now. "You need to be more assertive, Christine. Just tell them you need to go." Mr. Moncharmin looked like he wanted to be there even less than she did. He squinted into the computer monitor as if it were a solutionless Rubik's Cube. "One of your professors fast-tracked your exam results as a matter of urgency," he said tiredly. "How come?" Christine asked. "Well, let me get to that." He typed on the keyboard with one finger at a time. "The results of your academic test were good. Very good, actually. You scored a 98%. A wave of relief flushed over her. "Thank you. Osborne flashcard." However, the elderly man continued, your practical exam did not go as well. What did I get? She asked nervously. You failed, unfortunately. No, damn it. Sadly, to continue enrollment in our highly in-demand performance course, you need to achieve at least a pass on each practical exam. Academics we can work with. The way you come across musically, however, is not so easy. But sir, I was asked to replace a vocalist. I can't sing, and I passed out, surely. It's not just about today, dear. We've also got your violin class records here. You've been struggling for a while. We were perhaps a bit premature giving you a place here. With your father being lead strings professor, we just assumed. He didn't need to finish his sentence. So, what does this mean? The violin student asked, swallowing a lump in her throat. Christine had poured her soul into coming here. Her father had pre-donated his life insurance money to pay for 3 years' worth of tuition up front. He'd sent glowing recommendations to his former colleagues and bought the very best second-hand violins he could get for her every birthday. She'd wrecked herself every day, working after classes to afford dorm and living costs, as well as new strings and learning materials. In return, she got to breathe the same air as her dad every day, got to play and learn in the place he'd loved above all. See his pictures and trophies displayed behind glass when she walked the corridors. She lived, ate, and breathed London's Academy of Music. This was all she wanted. I'm sorry, dear, Mr. Moncharmin continued. If it makes you feel any better, you're not the only student we had to let go. This school is not very forgiving. This can't be happening. One of your professors thought it was best we'd let you know now before the weekend, so you can be at home with your family and plan your next move. Mr. Persian, no doubt. My next 3 years here have already been paid up front. How can I? Yes, the wrinkled man sighed. Regrettably, it is very regrettable. The Academy does not hold any sort of refund policy, so I'm afraid no funds would be able to be credited back to you in any way. All of her dad's money, gone. She couldn't have stabbed his memory more if she'd tried. She rose to her feet and gave her now ex-headmaster a slight nod. Thank you, sir. She received a sympathetic little nod back in return. Your father was truly loved and respected here, child, he said as she turned to wheel her suitcase out the door. She guessed this was meant to make her feel better, but she barely managed him a smile before her lips started to wobble. No, I'm just going to be a bit late, that's all, Christine spoke quietly into the phone, not able to say the words out loud yet. She would have to tell Meg at some point, too, her boss Ed and Raoul. She wouldn't get to spend any time at all with her childhood friend now. Her musical journey in London was over. I have to go, Aunt Val. I'm leaving for the station now. She placed the receiver down. Her uncharged mobile meant she'd had to use the Academy's corridor phone. It was dark outside now, a typical autumn evening. It seemed to spread into the building, seemed to dim the school's lighting of its own accord. There were no students around at this time. They'd either left for the weekend or were bunking safely in their dorms before curfew began. Christine, someone whispered sharply. She shot around, a gasp in her throat. The corridors remained empty. Her heart sped up. She grabbed her suitcase. She was getting it as bad as Meg, translating creaks into whispers. That was one good thing about her failing, she supposed. She wouldn't have to hear about fictitious phantoms anymore. She headed to the entrance doorway quite speedily for someone who didn't believe in ghosts. A dark silhouette stepped into sight several yards in front of her. She squinted to make out who it was. "Professor Giry?" Christine said as she got closer. "I was just about to leave for the train station." "Oh, don't worry, dear," she said, smiling and blocking her path. "I'm not here to lecture you on curfews." Professor Giry was a striking woman with her jet black hair and eyes, smart suit, and sharp features. She was very put together, only offering a hint of disarray in the crooked smile God had given her, as well as being the head vocal. Professor Giry was also Christine's best friend's mother, Meg. "I am here because it has been brought to my attention that you have failed your exams and are leaving us." She had none of Meg's tact. "Yes, I have a proposition for you," she interrupted. "Don't leave tonight. Stay for the weekend and work with a private tutor. Your class will be attempting a repeat performance of Ange de la Mort next Friday to satisfy today's disgruntled audience. You can appeal to retry your solo. I can redo the exam. You can, but there's a catch. Your grades have disqualified you from continuing in strings, but this doesn't prevent you from staying enrolled and changing majors. After all, your academic marks are one of the highest in your year's group." "You mean switch which instrument I play? I only know the violin. How could I possibly learn something that fast? Strings will now be your secondary module. You'll request to join me in vocals." "Vocals?" "Professor Giry, I appreciate the offer, but I can't sing. I've barely had a handful of lessons, and that was only since starting here. I'm not one of those people who think that they can't sing but secretly have this amazing voice. I cannot sing. I think I've proven that today." "Well, someone thought you could." Christine furrowed her brow. "Who?" "Walk with me," the middle-aged professor set off suddenly, giving Christine no real socially acceptable choice but to follow. Her suitcase wheels sounded like late afternoon traffic throughout the quiet halls. The great maestro is one of the best vocalist teachers in the world. He's responsible for the careers of West End stars Kat Sheen and Claire Young. It is imperative to your future that you accept and attend all his private tuition. Best in the world? I could never afford something like that. "It's all taken care of," the olive-skinned lady said, stopping in front of the theater door. She locked it with a rather clunky-looking key. It creaked open slowly and revealed a suffocating darkness. Christine instinctively took a step backward. "Well, go ahead," Miss Giry said. "Your interviewer is waiting. Here, in the theater. Who is he?" "No one you've likely seen around. He keeps out of the spotlight, and as such has been affectionately nicknamed the Phantom." "The Phantom? What should I call him?" "I'm sure Mentor will suffice." Giry took the student's belongings and shoved her to the doorway. The theater lights clicked on by themselves. The rows of mahogany velvet chairs and contrasting stage curtains materialized into sight. The room was simply awe-inspiring, heaved with solid wood might, decorated in ceramic grace. It was the heart of the academy. This was the first time Christine had ever been alone in it. It felt somehow different. She involuntarily reached out a hand to feel one of the chairs, and as she did, heard the heavy door slam shut behind her. She gasped, turning. "Professor Giry?" Christine tried to open the door, only to hear the sickening sound of a key turned in the lock. "Miss Giry," she banged on the hard wood. Fading footsteps were her only reply. Christine turned around, her gaze unwillingly drifted to the space that had served as a committed site for Logan King. Why had Miss Sherry locked her in here? A dark flash caught the student's eye. It came from one of the observation boxes above. Of course, by the time she looked, there was nothing there. Meg's ghost stories crept into her head again. Christine Daae, a male voice echoed, loud and sharp. She snapped her eyes towards the source. It came from the stage. Hello? Christine said. Are you the vocals tutor? Miss Sherry has me locked in here. Yes, I am your vocals teacher. I have seen something great in you, Christine, a rawness, a brilliance in your voice. Christine slowly walked closer to the stage, but still saw no one. If you commit to becoming my student, I will make you a star. You will travel the world's capital theaters, receiving ovations wherever you go. I have no experience in singing, sir. Perhaps you're mistaking me for another student. Christine thought of Carlotta. There's probably a list of tutors lining up to work for her. There is no mistake. My program is hard, unforgiving, but abundantly rewards those who are resolved. Christine hesitantly made her way up the stage steps. The voice became louder with each step. It is your choice. You may stay and dedicate yourself to vocals, or you may leave London's Academy of Music forever. Excuse me, sir, but where are you? I value my privacy, he said. These lessons will be strictly between us. You will not tell them to your friends, your guardian, or even your teachers. His voice had a strangeness, an almost hypnotic pull, but she couldn't help but walk towards it. She realized it must be coming from behind the curtain. She reached out a hand, compelled to swipe it away. Stop, he ordered. She put her arm back to her side. He could see her? Her heart pounded harder. She was so close to the owner of the voice now. Professor Ziri said you tutored the West End stars Kat Sheen and Claire Young. She tried to keep her voice stable. Indeed, she is correct. She could almost hear him breathe. Why wouldn't he show himself? So will you learn under me? Be my student? As melodic and authoritative as his phantom voice sounded, as much as it and its offer enticed her, there was another part of her mind silently nagging her, a voice becoming louder and louder. Run. Could I think it over? I'm extremely grateful for. Yes, but do so quickly. Inform Miss Sherry when you have made your decision. She will provide you with a schedule and whatever else you may need. She cleared her throat and nodded, then walked off the stage and back towards the entrance. It crossed her mind that Professor Ziri might not let her out. Before her panic had time to indulge, she heard the lock click open. Until next time, the tutor said, his voice fading a little with each word. Christine Daae. The door opened and revealed a brightly smiling Miss Sherry. Christine looked at her, bewildered. My apologies for locking you in, dear. The Phantom requires a lack of disturbance at all times. Okay, Christine inhaled. I really have to go if I'm going to get home for the weekend to see. It dawned on her. The strange tutor had said guardian, not parents. How had he known? Will you be joining us for vocals? Jerry asked with her huge crooked smile. I have to go, Christine said, grabbing her violin and suitcase and running to the front door. She stepped into the cool darkness outside and inhaled smoky October air. The lights of the city offered a sweet solace. She loved to walk among them, the lit-up windows of buildings, accommodating late workers, the headlights of cars swishing by. The roads were certainly never short of taxis. She got into one and headed for the station, watching through her rain-spattered window as the monstrous beauty of the academy faded from sight. The day had been insane. First she'd passed out, then she'd seen Raoul de Chagny for the first time in 5 years. Then failed her exams, lost her place at the academy, been locked into the creepy theater, and met an apparently world-renowned tutor who wouldn't show his face. She just needed to go home and figure out her next move. "You've just missed it, love," the train instructor informed her. "Next one to York's in 55 minutes. Christine used almost the last of her debit card fund to buy a one-way ticket and took herself and her belongings to a vacant bench. She picked on the creamy blueberry cereal bar hidden in her bag as her stomach rebuked her for missing lunch. She'd kill for one of V. Light's toasted cheese sandwiches right now. Damn it. She couldn't put off letting her boss Ed know how much longer. It wasn't like she could take a 3-hour train to work every day. She needed to tell him she was leaving London for good. Her heart ached at the thought. The cold wind blew against her harshly. She zipped her coat higher. She'd let everyone down, including herself, and none more so than her father. Being a professor at the school had meant everything to him. By being there, she'd gotten to carry on living for the both of them. She realized there was one last thing she needed to do before she left. The cemetery was empty, though only a 10-minute bus ride from the train station. It seemed to separate from the rest of London and hold a domain of its own. Christine placed her violin and bow on Anthony Dye's grave. She could still see his musical note encryption, even in the rapidly darkening night. "I'm sorry, Dad. All your money wasted on me." Rain spat down on her face. "I hope I'm making the right choice. I wish you were here to tell me. Professor Giry says I should switch courses. She has a tutor that can help. It would mean I could stay, but the tutor, I don't know, really. It's like he's not of this world." She looked at the silent graves and closed her eyes and bowed her head. "Please tell me what to do." The rainwater met the fresh tears on her cheeks and gently fell onto the grassed roof of her father. "Please come back." The student got up after a hopeless moment, not even bothering to wipe the damp grass off her knees. She set off back to the bus stop, leaving the violin with its rightful owner. Music began to play behind her. She stopped in her tracks as ice ran down her spine. It wasn't just any music. It was the start of her dad's original melody, "Innocent Prisoner." She turned and looked towards her father's resting place. The violin stood still as the inanimate object it was. The music, however, continued playing. "Dad?" she whispered through tears. As far as she could see, she was the only soul here. "Is that you?" The extraordinarily sad tune played louder. Christine rushed forward, scanning the graveyard. "Dad!" she yelled fruitlessly against the wind. A surprisingly dry newspaper page suddenly blew to her feet. She picked it up and read the headline, "Kat Jean, graduate of London's Academy of Music, wins International Singing Award." Kat Jean. Wasn't she one of the students the mystery tutor said he taught? It must be a sign. Her dad really was speaking to her. He was telling her to go back. The invisible stringed melody stopped. She looked at the concrete angels surrounding her. That was it. He had told her that when he was in the next life he would help her. He would send her an angel of music, someone to guide her, help her touch her dreams, She thought at the time perhaps his morphine had been a little too high, but with his mysterious tutor, it had to be her dad's doing. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered. "I know what to do." She arrived back at campus 40 minutes later, thoroughly soaked. The thought of a hot shower and dry PJs increased her pace. She noticed a last car in the college park. Its headlights turned on and drove beside her slowly. The student was taken aback to see Professor Giry driving. She smiled intently at Christine. Strange. What's she still doing here? Christine was too tired to expand on the thought, and dragged herself through the college entrance and up to the dorms. She had realized halfway through her bus journey that in the overwhelm of the graveyard situation she had left her father's violin behind. She'd pledged to go back the next morning to retrieve it. She walked through her door, closed it, and removed her wet coat and jeans. It only took her a second glance to realize her father's violin was stood on the bed. And we are stopping after 2 chapters. We'll continue on to chapter 3 in the next video, which is called Lessons. I hope you've enjoyed. It's been such a long time since I've read this, and as I remember, it is one of my favorite Phantom of the Opera fanfictions. I suppose it would be called YA, as in for young adults. I think the age range was 12 to 18, which is quite a large gap, but I hope that we can all enjoy it nonetheless. It is a standalone, and yes, thank you so much for being here, and I hope you have the coziest of evenings, my loves.